Hello, this is Victor Lopez. I wanted to deviate from what I've been doing lately in terms of putting out a number of poetry readings and some short story readings by doing something a little different. I wanted to create a simple book trailer for my Mindscapes 10 science fiction and speculative fiction short stories collection by actually reading the first 2 pages of each of the 10 short stories to give you a little bit of a flavor of what they're about. Uh, Please forgive in advance the fact that this is a cold reading, and unlike the audiobook version of this book, which is professionally mastered and read by real voice talent instead of its author. This is it's by no means a professional reading, but it's something that I wanted to do, that I thought I would enjoy, and I hope that you will find something to enjoy in it as well. Thank you very, very much for listening. Eternal Quest. The scent of freshly cut lawn lingered softly in the air, floating upward with the light haze formed by the morning dew warmed by a rising sun. The sound of a riding mower gently buzzed in the distance as the groundskeeper, an elderly black man dressed in clean, well-worn coveralls and sporting a frayed, too-large straw hat, slowly wound his way around the expertly and lovingly maintained grounds. Occasionally he stopped the old mower to uproot an intruding weed that caught his eye. As the man stopped momentarily to retrieve a small fallen apple-tree branch, a tiny wren sang tentatively a short distance away. The groundskeeper looked up, wiping his glistening brow with a large soft cotton handkerchief, smiled, and whistled a short melody in the bird's direction. It was answered almost immediately by a long, undulating song. The man again replied in kind while continuing his work, and gained an even louder retort from the bird, which might be answering the call or simply trying to attract a mate. After a short while of point and counterpoint between the two, the man resumed his work as several new voices joined in from various places along the grounds, their songs and calls resulting in a chorus of somewhat dissonant sounds as other birds joined the impromptu chorus undaunted by the mower's discordant hum. In the center of the grounds stood a large, square building, its walls a composite of reddish-brown brick and weathered gray flat stones rising to the height of 3 stories, with its small, dark, tinted windows and sharp edges striking an incongruous, dissonant note amid the otherwise pastoral setting. Inside the structure, in a small private corner room on the uppermost floor, sat an obviously tired yet alert woman in her early 30s. Next to her, in a bed which raised gleaming steel railings that seemed too large for its current occupant, lay a man who appeared to be several years her senior. The walls were clean, brightly white, and spotless, although the paint was somewhat faded in a few places, and hairline cracks and small areas of chipped paint were discernible upon close inspection, particularly on the ceiling. The floor, though freshly polished, showed numerous old scars over its black and white checkerboard patterned tiles in places over which heavy equipment had been moved for many years. A hint of ammonia and alcohol hung in the air, along with more diffuse and less familiar scents, which, while not of themselves unpleasant, were somewhat disquieting in their lingering, unnatural presence. The woman was lean, neither beautiful nor plain, with soft, light brown hair which fell haphazardly about her shoulders in contrast to her spotless, if somewhat wrinkled, tan silk suit. She sat erect, despite being in obvious need of rest, both feet on the ground, palms resting on her knees. Her hazel eyes, bright and alert, if somewhat reddened from lack of sleep, were fixed, unblinking, upon the man in bed, whose eyes were open but unseeing, as he lay connected to a respirator. The second short story in the collection, To Sleep, Perchance to Dream. I am not insane. Of that fact I am certain. It matters little that nobody reading this will believe me. Frankly, I don't much care. My death will be hardly noticed. I am not even sure why I'm writing this. Ostensibly, it is to leave behind a warning, some vital information which is quite valuable if it is believed. But I guess it is also out of a childish need for reassurance that I leave this testimonial. I suppose I'd pray if I believed in God. How comforting that would be, simply to go to bed, close my eyes, and put everything in the hands of some benevolent deity. If only I still had even the illusion of hope. No matter. I just want to make it clear. I am sober, lucid, and drug-free. Facts that blood and urine tests that will doubtless be performed on my post-mortem will clearly verify. I hope this letter will convince you no illness or natural cause can explain my condition, that the coma I am certain to lapse into as soon as I am no longer able to remain awake has no physiological cause and is not rooted in some infirmity. Please, please believe that. The hope that you may is the only remaining source of comfort in these waning moments of my life. I'm sorry if I ramble. I'll try to be concise. I'm so damn tired, though. I've not slept in 20 days. That's ironic. It's a new record. Nobody's been able to stay away that long before. Others who have tried cracked in little more than a week. But then their lives did not hang in the balance between sleep and wakefulness. In my case, it will end soon. But to the point. It all started just a month ago. I mean, the nightmares. At least that's what they seemed to be at first. God, it felt good to wake up the first few times and know it was only a dream. I never fully appreciated the absolute bliss that awakening from a bad dream brings and its delectable deliverance from the unimaginable inner horrors of the sleeping mind. There is no pleasure quite like being rent up from the bowels of hell, squeezed up through the narrow, shimmering tunnel of our emerging consciousness to a rebirth in the warm safety of a familiar bed. The light of a new day pushing nightmarish images back into the shadows of the unconscious mind, calming the frenzied hammering in our chest back to blissful quiescence. It had never occurred to me to be thankful at such times before, or even to revel in the delicious feeling of dissipating tension as fear fades, its effects lingering in the awakening consciousness, with adrenaline still pumping and the heart pounding in a chest seemingly too small to contain it. I would gladly sell my soul, had I one to sell, to experience that indescribable relief once more. What price to live the dream? Ken was tired, despondent, and none too sober. He'd learned only a few hours before that the Phoenix Project, of which he was the lead scientist, was about to be scrapped, that funding would not be renewed by Congress for the current fiscal year to the intelligence agency for which he worked. He saw the last 15 years of his life, years in which he'd been entirely absorbed in working on his most carefully guarded project, and which had borne success beyond his most optimistic hopes, rush by him in a swirling haze. His life's work was dissolving before his eyes like an early morning mist burnt away by the unforgiving sun of a new day and a new Washington administration, unfriendly to risky, high-priced, covert projects. The Phoenix Project had been his life. He had conceived it while an undergraduate student at MIT and had taken on a life of its own until it became his raison d'etre. He used his considerable powers of persuasion and political connections. Being the son of a senior senator certainly did not hinder his efforts, and he had not been shy about enlisting his father as an ally from the start, to convince the intelligence agency that his project was both feasible and of unparalleled value as an intelligence tool, and much too dangerous to be developed by private industry. All three assertions were undeniably true. Unfortunately for Dr. Kenneth Lyons, having cast his lot with the government, he was now precluded from pursuing his project through the private sector, despite the fact that the cost of further research and development from this point on would be relatively modest. The pointed success he had achieved to date would make many technology companies and most foreign governments literally kill to get their hands on his work, and would make him to only an instant billionaire, but guaranteed Nobel laureate. Simply put, the Phoenix Project represented a quantum leaps in computer technology and nanotechnology that allowed for a symbiotic melding between humans and computers. Dr. Lyons had succeeded in creating a device which could read and store any person's complete memories from birth and download them into a computer's memory, where they would be stored and could be enhanced, manipulated, and made to interact with the real computer-enhanced and computer-generated virtual memories of thousands of other people. Any person interfacing with the system may be made to relive his past from any given point with such accuracy as to make it indistinguishable from reality. Any past experience could now be relived in minutest detail, but the system was far more than a virtual memory generator. The subject interacting with the system still retained the free will to change past events by making different decisions from those made in his or her past, thereby affecting a change in all that followed from the moment in time onward. Decisions great and small that define our lives and its intrinsic quality could be revised. Doors closed by past choices, destinations forever unreachable in life after taking the wrong fork in the road, leading to the wrong career, the wrong friendship, the wrong mate, could all be potentially revised. Margs, or why Godot can't come. Something was definitely wrong with the world. The provider appeared to have abandoned his children, and the cold advanced unchecked from the great beyond, even as the land lost its life-giving warmth. And although every single being was aware of the incipient disaster, none could understand the reason for the inexplicable climate change, let alone think of a way to stave off the certain destruction of their kind. Margs, The dominant beings in a world of almost limitless bounty are highly resilient, sentient beings who had evolved in an environment that offered no natural impediment to their growth and development. With no natural enemies to protect against and no need to marshal limited resources, Mergs, who are not by nature particularly gregarious, never developed a social structure or any concept of property. All the necessities of life are provided by the land in inexhaustible quantities. Each simply takes from the land in accordance with its needs or appetites without the slightest need for toil, industry, or planning. Food can be found all around in limitless quantities and variety. All that is required to procure a meal is to bend down and scoop up tasty, highly nourishing morsels of delectable substances in endless variety and inexhaustible quantities. Thirst-quenching, delicious liquids, quite nourishing in their own right, are available in pools, lakes, and rivers of various sizes scattered throughout the land. As with solid food, the land offered up liquid nourishments in endless variety, some yielding intoxicating effects not unlike that of alcohol and hallucinogenic drugs in the human system. These intoxicating springs are particularly popular with Mergs who are not by nature temperate creatures. Although the Merg's existence might seem an utopian one, there is, alas, a price exacted for such a life of perpetual ease and unending bounty. Endless leisure of an existence devoid of challenge have made the Mergs into a rather intellectually dull race. Intelligence is not prized in a land so freely yields up its bounty where there is no game to hunt or trap, no enemy to guard or plot against, and no need for shelter to protect one's property or oneself from the elements, or the aggression and greed of others. Thus, while Mergs had same genetically coded survival instinct as all other living organisms, the particular circumstances of their rather hospitable world did not necessitate that it give birth to science, mathematics, or cultivation of knowledge that is, at its most fundamental core, is born of the survival instinct. For Mergs, survival merely required eating, sleeping, and reproducing to take place. And since Mergs reproduced asexually, that function is best served by eating as much as possible, thus obtaining the necessary mass and energy required by the reproductive function. Not surprisingly, then, Mergs spent most of their waking hours eating or looking for new sources of food in order to find pleasure in what would otherwise be the tedium of their primary occupation. Earth Mother. She awoke in the throes of a mind-numbing panic. Her eardrums sympathetically vibrated with the subliminal hum of an unseen, unheard, yet very palpable force just below the threshold of audible frequencies. Her heartbeat sloshed in her ears as though she were underwater, desperately trying to escape a powerful predator. The adrenaline in her veins and the irrational fear that paralyzed her made every joint in her body ache and yielded spasmodic pains as though her muscles were tightly coiling around themselves. Her mouth dry and vocal cords frozen from fear, Lisa lacked the power to give voice to a scream that was born, grew, and died in her throat without expression. Unable to move and still unaware of the cause of her discomfort, Lisa could detect a barely perceptible blue-green aura through the partially closed Venetian blinds and drawn drapes in her bedroom. The air was charged. She could sense it through the prickly itch of her hair standing on end. It smelled like a summer thunderstorm had just passed by, despite a cloudless sky. After long, silent moments of languishing, transfixed in an irrational terror, satin sheets clanging coldly to her naked body as she lay in a perspiration-soaked bed. A painful flash of white light inundated her bedroom, leaving Lisa temporarily blind, with multiple circular black afterimages receding slowly through her repetitive blinking, eventually fading to gray and melding into a humanoid form standing some 6 feet away from the foot of her bed. The form, a hairless, androgynous, ashen-skinned humanoid with large, seal-like black eyes, a button nose, with thin, small lips, approximately 5 feet tall, and weighing perhaps 95 pounds, finally spoke to her. More accurately, it transmitted words and fragmentary, vivid images into her mind, accompanied by a soft, musical sound that might be speech and was as beautiful as it was unintelligible. "Please, please don't hurt me," she thought, still unable to utter a sound. "No need for fear. We will not do you harm. Be calm," the creature replied in visual words and images that were fragmented but quite clear. "Please go away. Oh, God, help me, please." Lisa would have cried and screamed and run had she the power to do any of these things. Since she did not, she lay still, mentally pleading with the seemingly innocuous creature whose presence, despite its attempts at reassurance, had done little to ameliorate her dread. "Do not fear. We bring you a gift with which to bargain for your help." The creature's facial expression and body language did not change, but the visual message it transmitted clearly tried to show its goodwill. Warmth, happiness, contentment emanated from the creature, as does the sweet scent of a flower carried by a slight summer's breeze. "You won't hurt me?" Lisa half asked, half pleaded, somewhat reassured by the creature's communication, yet certainly not disposed to accept its alleged goodwill at face value. The day the dolphins vanished. Beatrice Benson, BB to her colleagues and friends, would be at home in any exclusive beach resort anywhere in the world, tanning her perfect body, while her long, lustrous, light brown hair absorbed and weaved the sun's rays into auburn and blonde highlights as legions of men tripped over one another for the chance to fetch her a cold drink, a towel, sunblock, or anything else her heart desired, in the hopes of gaining the simple reward of a flash of her brilliant smile. If she were not preoccupied by more important things, Bibi would have been amused by these attentions, of which she was largely unaware, in part because she was not the type to frequent beachside resorts or spend much time lounging on beach chairs, and in part because her preternatural beauty and credentials, PhDs in marine biology, electrical engineering, and linguistics, all earned by her 30th birthday, quickly burned off the wings of desire of mere mortal men who were attracted to her like insignificant moths hovering about the seemingly friendly blue frame of a Bunsen burner, leaving them in a similar position in trying to hold a conversation with her as the average chimpanzee trying to grasp the finer points of the allegory of the cave from Plato's Republic. Fortunately for both moths and men, not too many moths fly about the average lab, and not too many men hang around the out-of-the-way craggy beaches and immense stretches of ocean that Bibi made her home while working largely on solitary projects, conducting research, writing papers, and otherwise contributing to the advancement of her fields with an IQ that Einstein would have envied and a work ethic that would have made John Calvin proud. Her current project had taken her to Florida's Gulf Coast, near Navarre Beach in Santa Rosa County, but far from the crowded, condo-dotted beachfront. A generous grant from the National Science Foundation allowed her to take her floating laboratory, a modern converted cabin cruiser, wherever she went, carrying its precious cargo of high-end computer and electronics equipment with which she hoped to bridge the communications gap between dolphins and humans. Her study of the available data had long before led her to the conclusion that dolphins have a highly evolved language. Computer analysis of the sounds emitted in the audible spectrum alone showed repetitions that closely mirrored speech patterns that span across all human languages. Lesser intelligent mammals emit sounds that convey meaning to their own species, but these are typically limited to communicating very basic information essential to the survival of the species, such as calls, warning about danger, or the availability of food, or simply warnings for others to keep away. Even insects evidence the ability to communicate that kind of information to their own kind. But dolphins and most whales are in a different category altogether, possessing brains that are larger than the great apes, including Homo sapiens, and evidencing the ability for complex communication. Justice. Time. The all too near future. Place. A courtroom. Setting. Final sentencing of a prisoner convicted of the last remaining capital offense on the books of a kinder, gentler, fairer world in which equality is no longer a mere aspiration. The prisoner stared impassively into the camera, bright lights causing beads of sweat to form above his eye and forcing him to squint. His perspiration-soaked thinning hair flattened unflatteringly against his forehead. No sound could be heard other than the faint hum of the air conditioner, whose airflow was directed from the high ceiling above the high seats of the three-judge panel towards the three judges, keeping their immediate area comfortably cool. The camera trained on them remained a respectful distance away, and no harsh lights illuminated their somber countenances. All three judges stared at the camera, showing no emotion, their hands folded in front of them on the surface of their capacious bench on top of three equal stacks of paper placed before them. Everywhere on Earth, citizens watched the unfolding drama over the neural net that provided fully immersive experience, indistinguishable from reality, effectively placing every citizen on the planet in the courtroom as the chief judge began to speak in a deep, resonant, clear voice. The evidence against you has been examined. This tribunal finds you guilty of the charges against you by a unanimous vote. Have you anything to say before we pass sentence? The camera cuts back to the prisoner. The lights brighten around him, and the heat rises perceptibly, adding fresh fuel to the trickle of sweat flowing down his flushed face, causing a bead of sweat to form at the end of his nose that he is unable to swat away because his wrists are restrained by metal bands at the armrest of his metal chair outside of the viewing range of the camera's tight zoom on his face. I am guilty of no crime, the prisoner protests in a low voice full of palpable weariness and resignation. You are guilty of the most heinous of crimes, the chief judge contradicts, raising his voice and causing the prisoner to cringe. That is not open to debate. This is your final chance to make what amends you may to those whom you have harmed through your selfish, deviant act. It will have no effect on this court's sentence. But I have done nothing wrong, the man emphatically protests as ribbons of perspiration roll down his neck and deepen the growing ring of dark sweat absorbed by his bright orange jumpsuit, leaving a collar of dark moisture around his neck. Silence! The Chief Judge hisses through tight lips. The records will show that the prisoner is unrepentant. This court finds that he willfully, maliciously, and without justification removed his neural connector with the purpose and effect of severing his connection to the neural nets. End of days. God spoke to me last night. No, I'm not a schizophrenic or a Jesus freak, nor am I a conspiracy theorist. Well, except for the JFK assassination, of course, unless principles of quantum mechanics somehow apply to bullets fired from book depositories with inhuman rapidity to perform a dance macabre through the bodies of governors before striking their intended target. But I know precisely the series of events that will result in the end of the world and will eventually give birth to a new universe. It came to me in a dream. No, really, it did. It all started pretty much like a bad Hollywood disaster flick. Sorry, I know that's redundant. With well-funded mad scientists doing what comes natural in fiction as well as in fact. Build us a big hadron super collider and we'll find the elusive Higgs boson God particle. Maybe we'll even come up with a unified theory that incorporates the pesky behavior of subatomic particles and allows us to demystify quantum mechanics once and for all. It turns out, not surprising to anyone other than scientists, of course, that a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, and that allowing children to play unsupervised in a chemistry lab or with super-duper neato particle accelerators is not such a good thing after all. Who'd have thunk it? The first hint that something was just a bit off-kilter came in the form of assurances by project scientists delivered with the smug expression and thinly veiled contempt with which they usually approach any communication with the unwashed masses. That yes, miniature black holes could probably be created by subatomic particles accelerated at nearly light speed through a 17-mile circular particle accelerator and forced to collide in a massive release of energy. But such black holes would quickly dissipate. No, they smiled complacently, there is absolutely no danger in these experiments. The second hint of a problem, and by hint I mean klaxons going off, red lights flashing, and Robbie the robot accordioning arms, waving wildly while proclaiming, "Danger, Will Robinson!" came when the Hadron Super Collider suffered some unspecified problems that caused it to shut down for months on end after its first full-scale test. When the 17-mile Super Collider was once again brought back online, headlines proclaimed the countdown would begin again for the end of the world. Smile, snicker, haha. What was not reported was the actual reason for the shutdown, since no one, including the geniuses running the experiment, knew the real cause, a miniature black hole that did not quickly dissipate in the lab as expected and caused the nearly catastrophic shutdown as it drilled an invisible hole a few molecules wide, eagerly sucking up anything that crossed its tiny event horizon as it accelerated slowly but inexorably downward, worming its way through the containment chamber, rapidly vacuuming vital bits of the temperamental equipment on its way to the center of the earth. The riddle of the Sphinx solved. The midday sun blazed in blinding glory directly over the great Sphinx of Giza as Dr. Zahi Hawass, the famous Egyptologist whose love of Egyptian antiquity seems rivaled only by his love of the camera, faced the score of reporters with his well-worn Indiana Jones hat and best cat who swallowed the canary smile. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. This is a great day for Egypt and the world, he began with an enthusiastic smile and eyes sparkling like a sleepy child's on Christmas morning. Our efforts over the past year to excavate the recently found chamber under the right paw of the Sphinx is complete, and we are ready to reveal its contents for the first time. Please, come with me that we may share this moment together. Without further ado, and in an uncharacteristically brief fashion, Dr. Hawass turned to his left, gesturing for the camera to follow. As he walked, he continued, turning to the cameras and beaming contentedly. We have uncovered a portal, but have not yet broken the seal, as we wish to share this moment with the world. Zahi, a reporter following closely to his right, called out, "Can you tell us what you expect to find?" The Egyptologist stopped and turned to the reporter with a patient, avuncular smile and stopped facing the cameras directly. "I have no idea, but I expect it will be wonderful things." He then turned and took several steps before once again stopping and turning to the camera. "You will see that there are no artifacts in the small antechamber we have uncovered, nor any artwork or extensive writing. There is, in fact, no traditional writing of any kind, but for a line of undecipherable writing above the sealed doorway that is unlike anything that has ever been uncovered in the past." "You mean the writing is illegible?" the reporter interrupted. "No," Dr. Hawass replied, dabbing his damp forehead with a large white handkerchief. "The writing is quite legible, but it is unlike any writing in the ancient or modern world. There are no glyphs, no previously unseen symbols over the doorway. The writing is not painted, but etched into stone and glows quite visibly even in low light. I expect it will take us quite some time to decipher its meaning, and the means utilized to achieve this bright glow, though we suspect it is some type of radioactive material similar to that used in instruments and watches in the recent past, though no trace of radiation has been picked up by our instruments." He then resumed, walking again toward the excavation, still some 50 feet away. "It is all part of the mystery, and it augurs well for whatever archaeological treasures may be secreted beyond the sealed wall, don't you think?" His statement ended right on cue at the foot of the vertical tunnel that resembled more a well than a traditional entrance to a burial chamber. And now the 10th and final 2 pages of Mars, Genesis 2.0. Earth had not stood a chance. Careful tracking of the known asteroid and its comet had accurately predicted some close calls from sizable rocks over the past several decades and yielded some spectacular natural fireworks alongside some notable devastation at least twice in recent memory over the skies of modern Russia and of the former Soviet Union from lesser meteors that, without ever striking the ground, still managed to make their presence known as they exploded in the atmosphere, releasing energy equivalent to hundreds of Hiroshima-sized atomic bombs. But none of the previous devastation wreaked on a defenseless planet by sizable asteroids in the past, including the one that erased the dinosaurs from Earth and paved the way for the eventual ascent of Homo sapiens, could compare to the 113-mile diameter spherical asteroid that struck the Earth on Sunday, July 19, 2020, in Tierra del Fuego at the southernmost tip of South America. The resulting devastation was complete. Within weeks, nearly all life on the face of the Earth was extinguished as the force of the primary explosion and the dozens of smaller impact zones from fragments of the asteroid that broke apart from the heat of entry. These secondary strikes ranged over a wide swath of the globe as far as Australia, while numerous fragments exploded in the atmosphere before ever touching the ground. Within weeks of the impact, the devastation wrought by our out-of-control fires, tsunamis, earthquakes, volcanoes, eruptions, and the sudden melting of a significant portion of the South Pole's ice cap foretold of the eventual extinction of all life on Earth. There had been notice, of course, 666 days of it, to be precise, a number that fueled an endless stream of debate, devotion, and gave birth to more than a few doomsday cults. Armageddon was duly delivered on time by a massive asteroid carrying the number of the beast. Pluto may have been demoted to a planetoid, but the ancient god of the underworld got the last laugh and the benefit of the bargain as he received 6+ billion new souls from a once verdant world, bludgeoned into a massive extinction event by an errant rock. The nearly 2 years of warning were insufficient to avert disaster. Earth simply did not have the technology to destroy or deflect a 113-mile-wide asteroid moving towards it at an orbital velocity of 20 kilometers per second on a previously undiscovered elliptical orbit around the Sun that took it into the Kuiper Belt beyond Neptune's orbit. It might have been kinder had humanity been spared the precise date and modality of its demise. But there was no way to hide the truth once it became apparent, and no way to spare the aftermath of that truth, or the lawlessness that resulted from the communal despair of people giving a death sentence without hope of reprieve. Suffice it to say that humanity's last 2 years were not on balance proud ones for a species performing its swan song. If this was, as some claimed, God's wrath visited upon an unrepentant creation that had learned little from the lessons of the Great Flood, humanity certainly gave little evidence of being undeserving of the punishment in the months leading to the end. And that, my friends, is the end of my cold reading of the first 2 pages of each of the 10 short stories in my Mindscapes collection. If you are interested in getting perhaps more of a preview, they are certainly available through Amazon. You can visit my author's page, or simply do a search for Victor D. Lopez at Amazon. My books are also available at all major book retailers. I hope you enjoy this, and thank you. If you're still with me, thank you very, very much for listening. This was a good deal of fun for me as I'm avoiding real work for an hour here. Thanks again, and please stay safe and keep your family safe during these difficult times.